Ahead of his visits to Japan and the U.S. starting this weekend, President Lee Jae-myung says he'll place national interests first in pursuing mutually beneficial diplomacy and security policies. And President Lee says scrapping past deals with Japan on wartime issues will be, quote, undesirable, while reaffirming his commitment to a future-oriented partnership with Tokyo. The founder of Microsoft and now chairman of the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates, is here in Seoul, voicing hopes of collaboration in South Korea on areas including global health, AI, and nuclear power technology. President Lee Jae-myung is just 2 days away from embarking on his trips to Japan and the U.S. And today, the president's office outlined his schedule. Our correspondent Song Yoo-jin begins our coverage tonight.
Ahead of his upcoming visits to Japan and the United States, this is what President Lee Jae-myung told his top aides on Thursday.
현재 국제 정세와 또 무역 질서가 재편되는 중에 풀어야 할 현안들이 너무 많습니다. 국가 이익을 최우선에 두고 호혜적인 외교 안보 정책이 실현될 수 있도록 최선을 다하겠습니다.
The president's remarks came after the presidential office released more details of his trips. President Lee and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung will first depart for Tokyo on Saturday morning. Upon arrival, the first appointment is a luncheon with members of the Korean community in Japan, followed by a summit with Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba in the afternoon and an official dinner.
Through the summit, the leaders of South Korea and Japan will strengthen the foundations for future-oriented cooperation, enhance trilateral coordination with the U.S., and hold candid discussions on regional and global issues, including peace and stability in the region.
Then on Sunday, President Lee will meet with members of Japan's parliament before heading to Washington, D.C. He's expected to arrive in the American capital that afternoon and begin a 3-day stay by having dinner with Korean residents in the U.S. The big day will be Monday, when he will have his first face-to-face meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House.
The two leaders will discuss ways to advance peace and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. They are also expected to deepen economic cooperation based on the recent trade agreement, particularly in semiconductors, batteries, and shipbuilding.
The president is also scheduled to meet figures from business and academic circles. Finally, on Tuesday, President Lee will travel to Philadelphia to tour a shipyard recently acquired by Korea's Hanwha Group. The yard is seen as a symbolic venue for Seoul and Washington's shipbuilding cooperation. The Air Force One jet will take off from the U.S. on Tuesday evening and return to Korea early Thursday. So the presidential office says National Security Advisor Wi Sung-rak will provide more specifics on these back-to-back trips, as well as the agenda for each summit on Friday. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
And President Lee had an interview with a Japanese news outlet ahead of his talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba this weekend, during which he dismissed the idea of scrapping past deals with Japan on thorny wartime issues. Our senior presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Overturning past agreements with Japan undesirable. That was according to President Lee Jae-myung in an interview with Japan's Yomiuri Shimbun, released on Thursday, referring to past agreements on wartime issues of Korean sex slaves and forced laborers. Lee says though the deals finalized under previous conservative governments are difficult to accept, they are commitments made between nations. At the same time, he noted the feelings of the Korean people should be taken into account, adding that what's more important is offering words of consolation in a sincere manner. In 2015, the so-called Comfort Women Agreement was reached under the Park Geun-hye administration, and in 2023, the third-party compensation scheme for wartime laborers was agreed under the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. Those agreements sparked some backlash in Korea. Calling Japan very important, Lee also stressed the importance of the Seoul-Tokyo relationship ahead of his talks with Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba this weekend in Tokyo, hoping to expand cooperation on the economy, society, and culture. The liberal-leaning leader highly appreciated the Kim Dae-jung-Obuchi Declaration, signed in 1998, to chart a new path for a future-oriented partnership, based upon which he expressed hopes to announce a new joint declaration that goes beyond.
I think we can expect something. A final coordination is needed, so it's hard to tell at the moment.
Cooperation with Japan, as well as trilateral cooperation with the U.S., is crucial in more than one way: North Korea. President Lee did mention the North Korean nuclear issue, outlining a three-stage roadmap for the first time that involves freezing, reducing, and dismantling the North nuclear and missile programs. He added that this will be pursued while maintaining a close coordination with the U.S. and pursuing active inter-Korean dialogue. He also pitched multilateral cooperation involving the U.S., Russia, the two Koreas, and Japan on the Arctic Shipping Route project. On China, President Lee said there are aspects of competition and cooperation when it comes to the bilateral relationship, adding it should be managed, taking into account various aspects. When the South Korean leader wraps up his talks with Ishiba this weekend in Tokyo, he'll be flying straight to Washington for his first summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The founder of Microsoft and now chairman of the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates, is in town to discuss solutions for humanity through nuclear energy and innovative tech in collaboration with South Korea. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Seeking windows to resolve growing challenges faced by humanity. Nuclear power and bioinnovation topped the discussion between President Lee Jae-myung and tech mogul turned philanthropist Bill Gates. On Thursday, the founder of Microsoft and now chairman of the Gates Foundation paid a visit to the presidential office in Seoul. President Lee commended Gates for his contributions to the world through the Windows operating system, as well as global health and development.
지구와 지구인 전체를 위한 그런 공공적 활동에 대해서 경의를 표하고 우리 대한민국 정부도 함께할 방법을 최대한 찾아보겠습니다.
Gates, meanwhile, noted South Korea's transition from a recipient to a donor of foreign aid, highlighting its role and innovation in advancing global development, such as in tackling child mortality through Korea's bioscience products.
The world has changed a lot, whether it's the geopolitics or the technology of AI. And so you have a huge opportunity to re-examine some of the key strategies and really reinforce the strong role that South Korea plays in solving many of these problems.
He added that while the evolution of artificial intelligence and science brings development and progress, such changes also raise concerns. He pointed to rising healthcare costs in low-income countries, stressing that multinational support is critical. Gates later said at a separate event there could also be partnerships between health agencies and North Korea as a low-income country in the fields of vaccines too, but noted Pyongyang has decided against such cooperation. Addressing the growing demand for power in advanced industries such as AI and semiconductors, Gates suggested small modular reactors could be an effective solution. President Lee expressed Korea's interest in constructing next-generation nuclear power plants. He said many local firms have been developing small reactors, and their presence in the global market is steadily increasing. Korea's second-largest conglomerate, SK, has invested $250 million into TerraPower, an SMR firm founded by Gates. TerraPower is also partnering with the Korean government to develop a global supply chain for advanced nuclear technologies. Visiting Korea for the first time in 3 years, Gates on Thursday also met with local press and politicians at the National Assembly. He said the Gates Foundation is planning to open an office in Korea, citing his frequent interactions with the country's authorities and businesses. He added he always enjoys coming to Korea and hopes to visit every 2 or 3 years. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The Netflix hit K-pop Demon Hunters isn't just topping global charts. It's fueling a surge of interest in Korean food, culture, and even tourism. And Korean companies are rushing to seize the moment, while President Lee Jae-myung is pledging stronger support for the culture industry. For more, we have our Kim Do-yeon here in the studio with us. Welcome back, Do-yeon.
Good to be here.
So, Do-yeon, let's start with Huntrix members' favorite snacks. I hear they have the characters on them in real life. Tell us more.
That's right, Dami. On Wednesday, Nongshim announced it will launch limited edition versions of shinramyeon and shrimp crackers, among others. The exact snacks enjoyed by Huntrix members in the film. Fans had already been associating the products with the show, and it was rather clear in the movie which real-life items the animation had included. Some fans even made their own labels to mimic the packaging. Now, Nongshim is making it official, teaming up with Netflix to roll out the items across Korea, the US, Europe, and Southeast Asia. I spoke to an official from the company earlier. Take a listen.
Just as K-pop Demon Hunters has introduced K-culture to the world, Nongshim will use this collaboration to genuinely share the taste and value of K-ramyeon and K-snacks with global consumers.
Now, there's actual evidence that people are now more interested in Korean food after the movie was released. And I'm sure the Korean companies are, trying to really seize that moment. Perfect timing for the companies other than Nongshim, right?
That's right. First off, as I said, Nongshim said collaboration was possible because the movie's fans were already making labels on their own to cover the items on the shelf to make it seem like the ones from the K-pop Demon Hunters. Now, merchandise is just a big part of K-pop in general. And so it's natural for merch from the movie to be selling well. Now, take a listen to this critic from yesterday's Arirang special.
It's not just about saying Huntrix is pretty. Fans ask, what are they holding? What are they wearing? What are they singing? If a song is out there, fans will try to cover it. That whole culture of imitation and participation has been built up through K-pop, and now the film is amplifying it.
All in all, it's the perfect time for Korea to jump on this as well. Like you said, there's evidence. According to Google Trends, searches for Korea worldwide surged to their highest level in nearly 3 years during the week of July 17th to 23rd. Interest even surpassed the spike seen last December when then-President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law. Now, since the release of K-pop Demon Hunters on June 20th, global searches for Korea have nearly doubled. Searches for Korean food also jumped to an all-time high, up 75% following the show's debut. And the government says it's not going to miss this chance.
Right, because also joining the special program yesterday was President Lee Jae-myung and also director of the K-pop Demon Hunters, Maggie Kang. The government is more committed than ever to support that industry, isn't it?
Right. President Lee has shown interest in fostering the culture industry. It's only natural because the industry itself is already doing well.
Right.
But take a listen to what he had to say yesterday.
겉으로는 화려해 보이지만 토대가 과연 튼튼하냐? 사실 속이 좀 비어 있지 않냐? 뿌리가 좀 썩어가지 않냐? 라는 지적을 하는데 공감하거든요. 튼튼한 뿌리를 만드는 역할을 우리 정부가 할 텐데 지금부터 시작이다.
Now, earlier this year, at the beginning of his term, the Lee administration pledged to build a top 5 cultural power. The government is expected to inject 51 trillion won, or around $37 billion over the next 5 years to do that.
Then tell us, what can the government do more to make more improvements in the industry that are actually needed?
Right, and there is something that we can see from the example of K-pop Demon Hunters. Now, despite the Netflix film's global success, the estimated 1 trillion won, or roughly $750 million intellectual property value of K-pop Demon Hunters will flow to the US platform, Netflix, and Japan's Sony Pictures. None of the world's top 50 IP holders are Korean firms, according to a recent study by the Korea Chamber of Commerce. By contrast, the US dominates with 32, followed by Japan with 7, and China and France with 2 each. The economic stakes are massive. Disney alone generated about $62 billion last year through IP-based businesses like Mickey Mouse and Marvel. Collectively, America's top IP companies earn revenues equivalent to around 13% of Korea's entire GDP. For Korea is still heavily dependent on manufacturing exports, such figures highlighted why building a homegrown super IP may be crucial to future growth.
Indeed, Do-yeon, thank you so much for the interesting coverage tonight.
Thank you for having me.
The ruling party at the National Assembly today passed one of its media reform bills. It then introduced a final bill in the package, prompting the main opposition party to launch a filibuster. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young has the details.
The second of three media reform bills aimed at reshaping the governance of public broadcasters has passed the National Assembly. The ruling Democratic Party on Thursday unilaterally pushed through an amendment to the Foundation for Broadcast Culture Act to reduce government influence over public broadcasters by increasing the foundation's board from 9 to 13 members. The foundation is the main shareholder of public broadcaster MBC. Of the 171 votes cast, 169 were in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstained amid a boycott by the main opposition People Power Party. The bill passed the Assembly last year but was then vetoed by the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. It was introduced again by the DP during a plenary session earlier this month but was not voted on as the July extraordinary session came to a close following a PPP filibuster. Following Thursday's vote, the DP brought forward a final media reform bill targeting EBS, again triggering a filibuster by the PPP.
The bill aims to ensure the educational broadcasting system's independence and political neutrality by expanding its board to include experts and representatives from various fields, and by improving transparency in selecting its president.
If we hand over the management and operation of public broadcasting, resources entrusted to us by the people, to those with no mandate, it would betray the trust of the people who gave us authority through representative democracy.
Under the National Assembly Act, a filibuster on each bill can be halted after 24 hours if at least 3/5 of the parliament agrees to do so. The final media reform bill is expected to be put to a vote immediately after the filibuster ends. However, no new legislation will be taken up on Friday as the rival parties agreed not to handle bills on the day of the PPP convention and instead add another session next Monday. The DP had initially planned to hold plenary sessions from Thursday to Sunday to push ahead with contentious bills left unresolved during the July extraordinary session. Next in line are the so-called Yellow Envelope Bill, an amendment to labor union laws, and a revision to the Commercial Act, with the PPP also planning to launch further filibusters, arguing the bills are being pushed forward without bipartisan agreement. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Foreigners will no longer be able to buy homes in South Korea's capital region unless for actual residents. On Thursday, the Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport announced that foreign individuals, corporations and governments must now get prior approval from local authorities to purchase property in newly designated zones. Now, this covers all of Seoul, most of Gyeonggi-do province and parts of Incheon. The move follows concerns that foreign buyers have been inflating housing prices by bringing in overseas funds without being subject to local regulations. The U.S. Federal Reserve's Jackson Hole Symposium kicks off this Thursday with much attention on Chairman Jerome Powell's keynote speech on Friday. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young has more.
Central bankers from around the world are convening in Jackson Hole, Wyoming for the Federal Reserve's annual conference. All eyes are on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, slated to deliver a speech on Friday morning local time. His address comes amidst political pressure from U.S. President Donald Trump, who continues to push for interest rate cuts. Market expectations are divided on what Chairman Powell will signal. This is due to the conflicting signals emanating from the crucial economic indicators, employment and inflation data. Employment indicators have begun to show signs of stress. U.S. employment growth in July proved weaker than anticipated. U.S. non-farm payrolls increased by 73,000 jobs in July, following a downwardly revised 14,000 increase in June, the fewest gains in nearly 5 years. Weakening employment data suggests a potential economic downturn, increasing the impetus for rate cuts.
We do expect the Federal Reserve to favor that side of the mandate. So, focusing more on the employment side versus the inflation side. And if we do see incremental weakening in labor market conditions in the upcoming weeks, I think Chair Powell wants to give himself a route to start to resume those interest rate cuts if that's indeed what happens with the data looking forward.
Conversely, the inflation picture remains unstable. The U.S. Producer Price Index for July surged by 0.9%, exceeding the forecasted 0.2% increase and the largest monthly increase since June 2022. This inflationary pressure hinders prospects for rate cuts. Meanwhile, minutes from the Fed's July session indicate that most policymakers largely agreed on maintaining the interest rate at 4.25% to 4.5%, primarily citing heightened inflation risks stemming from President Trump's tariff policies. Notably, however, two members of the Fed committee dissented from this status quo, voting instead for a 25 basis point rate cut at the last policy meeting on July 29th and 30th. This marks the first time since 1993 that more than one Fed governor has voted against a rate decision. 문지영, 아리랑 뉴스.
With the scorching heat, the heatwave warnings were strengthened today. Heatwave warnings were added in Yongin in Gyeonggi-do Province, Hwaengsong in Gangwon-do Province, and Gunsan in Jeollabuk-do Province this morning. Today, the daytime temperature in Seoul rose to 32 degrees Celsius, and in Samcheok and Kimcheon, it reached 36 degrees. The summer heat is supposed to cool down for the season of Choseol, which means welcoming the autumn on the traditional calendar. However, the heat seems to be getting stronger and stronger. The daytime temperature in Seoul will rise to 33 degrees on Saturday, and heat waves and tropical nights are expected to continue until next week. Tomorrow morning temperatures will start at around 25 degrees across the country. Daily highs will up to 32 degrees in Seoul, Daegu 35 degrees. Until this weekend, rain clouds will often cover the skies. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.